We live in a time of profound symbolic rupture. We know this well. Liquid modernity, as Bauman told us. It has emptied archetypes and discredited myths. Among the victims of this process is the sacred feminine, not as a gender, but as a symbolic and spiritual structure of creation. So often repressed by patriarchal history, religion, and culture, what is at stake here is not only the place of women, but the soul of creation that cries out for balance between strength and acceptance, between judgment and compassion, between Logos and Sophia. The mystical theology of the Old Testament of Judaism and the New Testament in Christianity, when revisited to the lens of psychoanalysis, offer us precious keys to understanding and healing the wound opened by the denial of the feminine dimension of a divine. And this reflection today is an invitation, a reconnection with the womb of faith, with the water of the soul, with the womb of language, with the mother who lives within each of us, and in God who is Father and Mother. In Jewish mysticism, especially when we study the text of the Old Testament, the feminine of God has a name, pronounced in Hebrew as Shekinah, the divine presence that dwells, that descends, that hides in exile, and that waits to be redeemed by union with the superior masculine of Hebrew wounds you. I found that it is not just an aspect of God, but a side that feels, that suffers with the people, that walks with the poor, that lodges in the pains of the world. And for the mystics of Judaism, there is a cosmic drama of separation between the divine masculine and feminine, and the whole history of salvation is, in fact, a story of reconciliation of these two poles. Shekinah wounds you, and here we have a very powerful image. Creation is wounded because the feminine has been torn from its place, and this creation will only be restored when there is a reintegration between the paternal and maternal principles, judgment and mercy. The exile of the Shekinah, it echoes in the human soul. As in Jewish mysticism, reconnection with the sacred feminine is the key to spiritual fulfillment. For the human being is not only an image of God who is a father, but also the image of God who is a mother. And here we need to understand why. In the New Testament, the manifestation of the sacred feminine is found in the figure of Mary Most Holy. Mary appears not as an idealized woman, but as the purest and most divine manifestation of the world's receptivity to the Word of God. Mary is the new Eve because she remakes what Eve lost. She listens, she welcomes, she gestates. She delivers everything that Eve did not. Great theologians have perceived in Mary Most Holy the pure form of the Church, the human soul in its state of radical openness to God. But beyond the dogmatics, which can be confusing for most of us, the figure of Mary has psychic implications. She symbolizes the unconscious that opens, transcendence, the place where the Logos of God is incarnated, and where lived in the Virgin Marian archetype of the totality of the anima mundi, anima alma mundi of the world, and her assumption into heaven as a symbol of the reintegration of the feminine into the divine. To deny Mary Most Holy is to deny the divine feminine that does not want to compete with power, but wants to generate the Word. Reconnecting with the Christian sacred feminine involves recovering the Blessed Virgin Mary as a real woman and a psychic, spiritual, and mystical symbol of the unconscious. What makes the mystery of God dwell within each of us? Historically, the sacred feminine has been reduced, I would say domesticated, or even excluded. Biblical female figures have been erased, replaced, or moralized. Who speaks of women in sermons? And in the psyche, the feminine as an intuitive, receptive principle, creative caregiver, and womb has been repressed in the name of reason, in the name of power and productivity. Freud pointed out that civilization demands repression. But Lacan went further. Lacan showed that the subject is constituted by language that castrates, defines, and excludes. Woman, says Lacan, does not exist in the sense that there is no universal signifier that names her. The feminine, therefore, appears as outside the system, as an exception, and it is precisely there that its revolutionary power resides. From a psychoanalytic perspective, reconnecting with the feminine is recovering what has been excluded from the symbolic. It is rescuing the part of the soul that does not fit into the formulas of the father, the boss, the pastor, the priest, or the algorithm. It is the return to the real that pulses, that gestates, that bleeds, that loves, that has contractions. It is urgent to return to the sacred feminine. We are sick from the absence of the feminine. The environmental collapse, The emotional exhaustion that we are experiencing, the hyper-digital control and the logic of this performance are symptoms of civilization without a womb, without listening, without tenderness. The masculinization of the divine has produced militarized churches, authoritarian assemblies, performative spiritualities. Reconnecting with the sacred feminine is not a fad, much less esotericism or feminism. It is a spiritual urgency. It is a chance to reconcile reason and intuition, faith and experience, transcendence and color. It is to rescue the womb as a place of theology, as a place of prayer, as a place of psychoanalysis. And here we need to understand that to restore the sacred feminine, we have 3 ways. The first of them is the liturgy of the womb. I always say this in homilies, a spirituality that involves the body, silence, and inner gestation. Rituals not only spoken, but felt. The psalms, for example, that weep, the songs that dance. Then, secondly, with the second path, a maternal listening. What is maternal listening? Being a place where the other can be born. This listening where the other can be themselves with reverence. This is a uterine act. We, as a church, need to listen less like a court and more like a midwife. And finally, a wonderful path, which is symbolic comfort, reinserting the women of the Bible into the narratives of our faith. So, forgotten in our discourses, the saints, the religious women who bled, and their names were silenced over the centuries. Their names were forgotten. Where are the sermons and the homilies that highlight women? We need to reteach humanity to gestate God, like Mary, like the Shekinah, like the soul and X, but also of pain. To conclude, my dears, the feminine cannot be a fashion. The feminine needs to be a mysticism. And here it is not about feminizing religion, but about restoring the balance of symbols. Spirituality that is born only from the mind is stereo. Spirituality of ideological ideas is sterile. Faith that is born from the womb of the world and fertilizes. Reconnecting with the sacred feminine is opening oneself entirely to the mystery that loves in the dark, that gestures in silence, and that generates Christ in every time, in yesterday, in today, in tomorrow. And perhaps it is in the return to the mother, in the return to the Shekinah of exile, in the return to the most holy Mary, in the return, that woman of the well, in the return to the part of us that cries in secret. May the world begin, at last, to be healed.